It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans. And a violent clash ensued. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment.
A demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to popular desires and prejudices rather than by persuading people with rational argument. I mention this because Joe Biden is a demagogue. In fact, Joe Biden is the worst kind of demagogue. He not only shamelessly appeals to prejudice, he is also willing to lie in the process. Racism does exist in America. However, it is not nearly as large a problem as people who would capitalize on it imply. For the most part, America is a place of extraordinary inclusion and opportunity. Hardly anyone believes that people of one skin color are morally or intellectually or physically superior to people of other skin colors. Hardly anyone believes that people of one skin color should be segregated from people of other skin colors. To the extent that pockets of discrimination still exist, screaming racist recklessly at everything white is neither the best solution nor a good solution. Racism is a serious and powerful charge. It should be reserved for genuine cases. The power of the charge should not be demeaned by those who feel they must virtue signal. It is very sad that Joe Biden has no compunction about slandering others as racist if he thinks doing so will get him some votes. If he wants to be president, he should be above this. The undeniable truth is that Trump never said that neo-Nazis are very fine people. The undeniable truth, therefore, is that Joe Biden is a filthy liar.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Kill the person. Heather hired Charlottesville.
They showed up in Charlottesville
Excuse me.
to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
It is also important to remember the larger philosophical point Trump made.
Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? and the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
We can remove statues, but this will not change our history. This will not ameliorate the mistakes of our past. Obviously, a local community should decide what art and memorials to display. In making these decisions, we must consider the pain our past mistakes have caused. Unfortunately, destroying relics and institutions will not prevent that pain. Such pain can only be prevented if we learn the lessons of our history and then not repeat them. In any event, for anyone interested in straight-up racism and discrimination in American law and politics, the very first stop on the tour would be at Joe Biden's office. Joe Biden learned from Richard Nixon that demagoguing for harsh anti-drug laws would get him votes. No one is for junkies raping, robbing, and killing. Joe Biden decided that whenever people hear the words drugs and crime, I want them to think Joe Biden. This cynicism ultimately had a devastating effect on the black community. Among other things for which Joe Biden fought was the federal sentencing guidelines. The basic principle of the guidelines is that people who commit the same crime should get the same punishment. For example, a person who robs a bank in California should get the same sentence as a person who robs a bank in Oklahoma. A corollary of the principle is that power is taken away from judges to impose sentences which are appropriate to individual cases. Under this system, every crime is assigned an offense level. The more serious the crime, the higher the offense level. Further, every convicted person has a criminal history. The more criminal events in a person's past, the higher the criminal history level. The sentence the judge must impose is found on a chart which sets out the sentence for every combination of offense level and criminal history. For example, if the offense level is 22 and the offender has 2 priors, then the sentence must be 46 to 57 months. It wasn't enough for Joe Biden to implement uniform sentencing. He also fought for harsh sentences and for mandatory minimums. He fought to eliminate parole and to require that convicts serve at least 85% of their sentences. Joe Biden got a lot of votes arguing that the way to deal with crime is to lock them up and throw away the key. He never cared about the consequences these vicious and repressive policies would have not just on prisoners, but also on their families and their communities. In 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that the sentencing guidelines are unconstitutional. Kind of. As a result, they are now considered advisory. Unfortunately, most judges still rely on them, and of course the mandatory minimums remain on the books. It is fair to argue that more than anyone else, Joe Biden is responsible for a criminal justice system which is overtly racist in its application. More than anyone else, Joe Biden is responsible for the prison crisis in America. That's not an opinion, that's history. Do you know what else Joe Biden got for demagoguing on this issue? A lot of fucking money from the banks and the corporations. There's a lot of money in prisons. They have to be financed, built, and operated. Not to mention, they provide a limitless supply of slave labor, the cost of which is socialized to the taxpayers and to the prisoners themselves. In fact, the largest private prison, which is mostly black prisoners, sits on the exact land which was once the largest slave plantation. It's 156 years later, and nothing has really changed. I can't say that Joe Biden is a racist. Probably he's not. He does have a black friend. Or at least he knows a white guy who has a black father. Joe Biden just doesn't give a shit about who gets hurt as long as he gets paid. Joe Biden for president is a sick joke. Look at this bullshit. He pledges to get rid of sentencing practices that don't fit the crime. These are the very sentencing practices for which he fought. He pledges to help former inmates rejoin society. Now that he wants more votes, he claims that he wants to help the people and the families and the communities he fought so hard to destroy. Do you know who actually fought to change sentencing practices? Trump.
Mr. President, there's nothing more important than freedom.
Yep.
There's nothing more important than freedom. That's what America was founded on. That's what the civil rights movement was founded on. Civil War was fought over. Women's rights, all the great movements about freedom. And this is a movement that's about freedom. In a country that is a democracy, we have the right to disagree. And we get to disagree. Dictatorship, you can't disagree. Dictatorship, You have to agree. We get to disagree. And where we disagree, on immigration, on foreign policy, climate change, we should fight hard. But we have a responsibility where we do agree to work together hard. And the freedom of people who are trapped in a broken system, the freedom of people who are trapped in addiction, the freedom of people who are trapped in poverty, those are the people that your opportunity zones are targeted at, your opioid policy is targeted at, and your criminal justice policy is targeted at. And when you're trying to help people on the bottom, sir, I will work with or against any Democrat, with or against any Republican, because there is nothing more important than freedom. So thank you, sir. Thank you.
Do you know who was actually fighting to help the black community? Trump.
I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs, you see where companies are moving back into our country, I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say, pouring back into the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me.
Joe Biden is also against Nazis. That's a huge surprise. Give the old man a hand. It took a lot of courage to come out against Nazis. But there is some irony in this. While Joe Biden smears Trump by implying that Trump is a Nazi sympathizer, it is Joe Biden who brought fascism to America. For example, because judges don't have very much discretion in sentencing, all of the power in the criminal justice system is vested in the executive branch. This not only creates a constitutional imbalance which would offend our founding fathers, but more importantly, it means that the police and the prosecutors decide who is going to jail and for how long. They stack the charges so high that almost everyone pleads guilty even when they're not. Joe Biden was also the leading advocate of the Patriot Act and is often claimed to be its author. This law gives the executive branch broad search and surveillance power, and it eliminated much of the power of the courts to supervise the police. This law gives the police the power to monitor telephone calls and email, collect bank records, and track internet use, all without a warrant. Does this make you feel safer? By the way, Bernie Sanders voted no on both the sentencing guidelines and the Patriot Act. Here is Joe Biden hanging the Presidential Medal of Freedom around the neck of George W. Bush, the piece of shit who lied this country into illegal wars of aggression, conducted blanket surveillance of everyone in America, committed war crimes and set up a program to torture Muslims, and sat by while the banks destroyed the world economy. Just as I can't say that Joe Biden is a racist, I can't say that he's a Nazi. All I can say is that he has acted like a Nazi for decades. Heavens to Murgatroyd, if Hitler even thought about having the police powers Joe Biden brought to America, he would have come in his pants. In conclusion, Joe Biden might not be a racist, but he's responsible for some of the most racist laws on our books. Joe Biden may not be a Nazi, but he's responsible for some of the most fascist laws on our books. One thing is certain, however, Joe Biden is a filthy liar.